Sports fans, get ready for Sportz-USA. Get sports from a personal point of view from seasoned professionals who've reported and lived the stories. Now let's go to the crew high atop the Sportz-USA press box. Hello, everybody. This is John Askins, and welcome to another episode of Sportz-USA.com. And spring is popping all over the country, maybe not so much in the Northeast, but we're glad you're with us today. I'm joined by Kevin Long from Dallas, Tom Russo from the College Station area in Texas, and way up in Grand Junction, Colorado, John Kearns, Coach K, and I'm here in Houston. So, guys, I hate to just start out by the current events, but I think that the Sports Commission that met this last week in Washington, D.C., that Donald Trump hosted is worthy of conversation. And, there were a lot of good things said, but I don't know if you really listened to the commissioners. I thought I was having a deja vu attack when I heard Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference, because if you remember a couple of weeks ago, I told you about going to see Harvey Schiller in 1987, and his first statement, it was like an echo of that conversation. Their position is they do not want to share revenue with any schools that do not invest in athletics the way they do. The way I see it is that the big conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten, right now they've got all the marbles. They're content to leave it just the way it is. They're going to be governing over a wasteland here in my opinion, if we continue down this road. What's your take?
Well, Nick Saban said something the other day that, the playing field better be equal. You give one school $3 million NIL money, another school $30 million. You're not looking at a level playing field there. So, they have got to, I guess you would say, get everybody on the same level playing field if they're going to be at all have any semblance of being competitive, so to speak.
Tom, what's your take on this?
So, as we were talking about this a little bit offline, I think ultimately you're going to see a big, giant conference that's composed mainly of Big Ten and SEC teams. Because when you stop and think about it, you have the SEC, then you have the Big Ten, and then you have everybody else. And we all know football drives everything, but even when you talk about other sports, the Olympic sports and other things, the SEC is ultra competitive in almost every sport.
Big Ten would beg to differ. They think they're on top. Well, if you're going strictly by money, I think the Big Ten is.
Well, I guess I'm going by maybe success on the fields or the courts as well. But arguably you've got both Big Ten and SEC near the top and everybody else. No one else is even in the same stratosphere. And so I could see those two kind of break it off and telling the NCAA to pound sand. What do you think, Coach K?
Well, we were talking, and again, you got 34 teams with the Big Ten and the SEC. And right now, again, listen to Sankey. I heard a couple of conversations he had in different areas, and he basically said, the fact we're not going to share the money. We've got the money right now. We've got control of the money right now.
Right.
Why in the world, why would any sane institution, and I think he almost used those exact words, give up that kind of control? Why do you want to give an equal share to somebody who isn't going to really contribute on television time or radio or any other money-making project? Why are we going to share what we're doing? We built the brand. We've got it. It's us. You got 34
Right.
schools. You add, maybe 3 or 4 outlers that are, I think you got to throw Miami in there. You got to throw a couple of others. But for some reason, and I think they want to have 10 regional conferences across the country, West Coast, Mountain, Queens, and East.
Right.
They don't want to give up the money. I mean, the money is going to drive it. there were a lot of good points brought out in that thing till it turned political. About halfway through, when Senator Cruz got on there, it kind of went south.
He always
But
sort of like a wet blanket, everything he does.
was. I mean, the fact is, he threw politics into it and spoiled the whole. I was on board up until that point. But anyway, the money is the thing.
Let me throw this quote in. Is for you, Kevin. Do you remember an Alabama running back, Trent Richardson?
I know coaches who claim they paid players. In other words, assistant coaches, and they didn't pay them, but they knew boosters who did. And long ago, 30 years ago, when I was first started out in the SEC, they said players never make those kind of statements for this reason. They flat out tell them, if you go around making a statement like, hey, I got $100,000 a year to play at Auburn, the first people who are going to come after you are the IRS.
Right.
What Trent Richardson allegedly said, is something that could get him. And I looked this up. It's funny you should be talking about it because I was looking this up as we were trying to get on the air. Trent Richardson, with the money he's claiming they gave him and he took, he could get 5 years in jail for that. So why would he say that? Well, anyhow, they, I guess you would say, pretty much looked it up and determined it was just a fake and a fraud. He never said that. Somebody put it on. And you'll look it up, you realize it was a fake. Nothing like that happened.
Yeah, that's one of the really awful things about the internet today is because, and they're getting so sophisticated because, they have a picture of the guy, doing something, and it's all AI generated. And that's, it's not only in sports, unfortunately, especially X or Twitter has just become a garbage pail of misinformation. Basically, the SEC had, for many, many years, I'm sure that this is accurate, a code of silence. And they're just exactly what you were talking about, because they knew if the money that was being paid under the table got out, there'd be all kinds of IRS problems. And also, differing from the Southwest Conference, I think they learned from the SMU situation. They knew that if one guy turned in another school would turn him in, and it would all be a big mess. And at the time that SMU was having their problems in the 80s, you might remember back, the SEC was coming out of 3 or 4 big scandals back then. And so they all just sort of decided to take a code of silence. And I think that's still, until this is spilled over in the NIL, it's been the way it's been. But let's get back to Cody Campbell, who is the Board of Regents chairman at Texas Tech, is proposing, and he seems to have President Trump's ear, is that all the schools, all those major schools, put their TV rights in one big bucket. And if they negotiate as a group, he feels that they'll get a lot more money than piecemeal by conferences. But you're right, Kevin. The conferences don't want to give up any they have. And to be quite honest, I don't know about you, Coach K, but I like seeing college football in the fall is really neat because you can watch Notre Dame, you can watch Miami, but you can also watch Boise State and San Diego State. And some of those games in the Mountain West are really, really exciting. And I don't really want an NFL type college football conference of 64 teams, and all you see every other week is Alabama, Auburn, or Alabama, Georgia. I think that is starting to really lose its appeal, just like seeing, the same NFL teams play every week.
The Big Ten and the SEC have kind of their own networks and stuff, and they're able to pretty well push what they want, the product. I don't know. You can go all the way down to level 3 and any given weekend. I call them the Tuesday, Wednesday games. And you can watch a game pretty much any night of the week with the lower level schools playing. And they're interesting, good quality athletes. They're out there giving it their all. But no, I don't know. After what I've read here the last week, after this meeting last Friday, I think money is going to be the determining factor, and greed. When you get into money,
yes,
greed. I go back to, show me the money. Why do they want to give it up? And I don't think you're going to see The two power conferences, I just don't see them giving it up.
Right.
Unless they're forced legally, unless Congress comes out, and I really don't want government getting involved because they can't run themselves.
One of the things that you might jump in is saw a graphic, and I'll find it here in a second. I don't see how the conferences can continue to exist in a situation to where the SEC since 2020 has written off $300 million in coaching buyouts.
Wow.
Now, I understand A&M's got a big share of that at $77 million, but
Yeah, Jim.
how can you continue to do business like that?
I don't know how they can continue to do business, but I do feel like, John, even though you don't want to see it, I think we're going to see it. I think we're going to see, it may be a few years down the road, but I think we're ultimately going to see this big giant conference. And I think we're going to see unbelievable TV packages with numbers that we've never heard of before. And if you throw in a team like Notre Dame and, like Coach K said, Miami, Clemson, and a few others, along with the Big Ten and the SEC, it's going to be that way. And I think you're going to find that all the others that are left are going to wind up scheduling games on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays just to get viewership on their programming and their type of games.
Kevin, as you can probably explain, this is all driven by the television executives at Fox, ESPN, the Mouse, and they are trying to set up basically an NFL of college teams.
Exactly right. When I read about how the Pac-10, Pac-12 was carved up, that literally was all done in a room in Bristol, Connecticut, where a couple of guys got together and said, listen, we'll take UCLA and USC and put them in the Big Ten and whatnot. And, everybody else can go pound sand and whatnot. So it's really, really a pretty preposterous situation. Now, Trump say he's gonna square it all away. Here's what I think they ought to do first. The first thing they ought to do, and everybody's gonna laugh at me, is get conference back into regional areas. For example, remember,
that's a great idea.
Remember when the ACC was Tobacco Road, and now all of a sudden they got California running cross country to play them. I mean, get USC and UCLA out of the pack or out of the Big Ten, send them back, and I'll tell you what, just do it so that they're in the same kind of regions. Because to me, here's what the SEC has going for them. When you got a game like, let's say, LSU is playing Georgia, they're from the same areas of the country.
You mentioned that last week, and you know what the first thing occurred to me was? The Southwest Conference was the model. You were talking about how LSU playing Ole Miss, and the town would be overflowing for fans, and it was a regional matchup. Why did they destroy Texas's teams? I know why, because it was only in Texas, but you're describing what the Southwest Conference used to be.
Yeah, where when A&M would play Tech or Rice would play, Texas, you're talking about teams from the same area. For example, when you see something like Stanford going clear across the country to play North Carolina State, I mean,
right.
Those
It's
people
absurd.
in North Carolina don't know a thing about Stanford and vice versa. And not to mention you're not, I always remember when Tech would play, let's say Texas A&M, you would have a full house, but you'd have a crowd from A&M there in Lubbock.
And vice versa. You would have a big crowd from Tech in Kyle Field.
And when I was in the Southeastern Conference, you saw that all the time. Auburn or Alabama would be playing teams like, it didn't matter if it was Tennessee or Mississippi State or Florida. Those teams would have their, let's say the stadium seated 80,000, the visitor would have 20,000. And it made for an incredible atmosphere that, I don't care where you are and how big it is, even if it's somebody like UCLA playing against Ohio State, you're not going to see that many UCLA people, you
Not at
know,
all.
in the Midwest, and you're not going to see many people from Columbus going out to Los Angeles. So, that kind of ruins the texture of the whole thing.
Coach K, I've got a comment that for those viewers who are younger than, say, 25, this will blow your mind. Back in the days of the Southwest Conference, in the late 50s, early 60s, the religious schools, as I call them, SMU, TCU, Baylor, and I'll include Rice in there, they had won the league as many times as the state-supported schools, Texas and Texas A&M. As a matter of fact, when they built Rice Stadium in Houston in the 50s, A&M could not fill their stadium in College Station. So they moved the Rice Texas A&M game for like 10 years straight to Rice Stadium in Houston, where they drew sellout crowds of over 70,000 people. Can you believe that today, Tom?
I can and can't. I mean, you wouldn't see that today. Rice Stadium's a beautiful stadium you mentioned, and they play almost to an empty stadium almost every week now.
Right.
So you're absolutely right. No, I couldn't imagine it in today's day and age.
And, Coach, the thing that you'll love, I'll put up the picture of it. You remember we were talking last week about people down on the field on the sidelines?
Yeah, my pet peeve.
I'll put up a picture. I've got a great picture. I believe it's a Rice game and a TCU game when all of the players are sitting on the bench. There's not a one player standing up, and the only person that's out front is the coach kneeling on the sidelines. It's incredible to see. And Kevin, I want you to tell your famous story. I will introduce this. When Kevin moved over to Alabama to work at a station there, he was also doing double duty as a bus driver. And so the Southeastern Conference at one time was pretty strict about who could be on the sidelines. And so Kevin would take a load of passengers to the game. I'm not sure if I remember what game it was. Kevin, why don't you take over the story?
Well, it was at Auburn. That's what I remember, but I don't remember who they were playing. But anyhow, to the people at Auburn, this became a common deal. They would see me in my Trailways bus outfit and with a camera on my shoulder.
Right.
Where I'd do double duty, where I'd bring a group of passengers to the game, and then they'd go sit in the stands, and I'd go down the field and cover the game. And, I guess I don't know which SEC official it was, but he was curious as to what a bus driver's doing on the sideline.
Yeah, Bo could tell this better than anybody. They were up in the press box, and your pet peeve, Coach K, about having these just random people down on the sidelines, they'd call down there and say, "Who the hell is that bus driver? How did he get down on the field? Get him out of there." And it was Kevin taking video.
Of course, I had a camera on my shoulder, so, it wasn't like I was the one that probably is even better than that is, are you familiar with a former Auburn coach named Cliff Ellis?
Yes, basketball coach, yes.
Cliff Ellis had an incredible career at Clemson, Auburn, whatnot. The first game that I guess he coached at Auburn, he really didn't know me at all. I was in my bus outfit and my Trailways deal, and we went to his press conference, and afterward, I'm in my Trailways bus uniform, and I just asked a question, those things like, "Hey, Coach, did you think you got a pretty good effort in the second half from your guys?" That kind of stuff. But he looked up, and it was a bus driver asking the question. He didn't say anything at the time, but when the press conference ended, he went and he got the SID and said, "What are we letting a bus driver in here for?" And the SID explained to him, that's not a bus driver. He's a sportscaster from Montgomery who, I guess you say, moonlights as a bus driver. So
That's right. Well, I'll tie in another story. This one, in case there's any kiddies in the room, you may not want to listen to this one, but this ties in Rice at Rice Stadium. Back in the 90s, Rice and Texas A&M you can't get any two different schools. I know that A&M and Texas are big rivals, but let me tell you, A&M and Rice is like oil and water. So anyway, they always had a great rivalry, and everybody remembers the marching owl band. The mob, it's still out there, even though they're playing in front of 5,000 people instead of 75,000 people now. But so they were hosting Texas A&M, and their theme that day was pretty risque because the mob comes out on the field and they've got a couple of their band members with those dog collars, that it looks like you're walking your dog, but there's really no dog there. And they were playing How Much Is That Doggy in the Window, because the A&M mascot, is Reveille Collie. And anyway, they put on this great show. They were all wearing floppy hats and acting like they were stepping in, poop, out there on the field. So anyway, when they went back up in the stands, somebody had made a paper mache penis. I'll just call it a dick. So somebody had made a paper mache dick, and that the Tom, you can explain that the leader of the A&M band, has this baton, and he goes up and down and up and down. And so in the stands over in the Rice band, they had this penis, and they were keeping time with the A&M baton. Okay, so
I remember hearing this story. Yeah,
I'm up in the press box next to Bobby May, the athletic director that then for the Owls, and it was the funniest conversation. He calls down to the sidelines and he goes, "Get rid of that dick. Can somebody go get that dick?" So anyway, a little while later, you see this Houston police officer, and he's on this sideline, and he slowly starts walking around the end zone and then up the end zone, and the dick's up here, doing this, And the funniest thing was, as he tried to get it, he gets in the stands, they start passing it around. And so there's this giant paper mache penis, being passed around. Well, he finally gets it. And the funniest thing was he puts it under his arm and walks all the way around the stadium again, all the way back to the west sidelines. And it was the funniest thing I think I've ever seen.
Crazy.
Second,
there are a lot of stories about the mob and all of that. I wanted to hearken back something that you were touching on earlier, and Kevin was talking about travel when it was all in one state or in one area, and you get more and more people. John, that my wife and I are big college football junkies. Our record in one day is actually 3 games that we went to in one day. At an early kickoff at Kyle Field. We went to that game. Then we went to the late afternoon game in Waco. Tech was playing Baylor. And then we saw that game, and then we drove like a bat out of hell and got to Houston and went to the Texas Rice game. That was the night game on ESPN.
Wow.
And we saw 3 games within one day. I don't know that you could do that anymore. It was an amazing day of college football for us, and we just thoroughly enjoyed it. But my point is, all those games were right there in that triangle between, College Station, Waco, and Houston, and it was easy enough for us to drive, 3-4 hours, going back and forth, all those things. We had the time to be able to get there and do it.
Coach K, they don't want, the network executives don't want to pay that many teams. They want to narrow it down to the top 64 teams. That way they
64.
can divide it. That way they can divide it into an equal playoff situation. And what do you think about that? Because in Colorado, they'll only need Colorado. They won't want Colorado State. They probably won't want Air Force, even though they've got such a national brand. How does that make you feel as a college football fan?
Well, I'm all for the regionalization of football right now. I mean, I agree with Tom and what you said. And, we've said it over and over again. When you have regionalization, geographic proximity, it generates interest. And Tom and I were talking earlier, it's an entertainment business. And the fact is, the better product you can put out there and the more people that you can make that product available to, either live or by network, it's going to serve a purpose for everybody, and it kind of, I look back and I was reading today, You know, a lot of people are blaming Oklahoma and Texas for starting off this whole avalanche of conferences being, the
No,
Pac-10,
it wasn't
Pac-10
them.
getting, Pac-10 getting torn apart, ACC getting, I mean, everybody went crazy for a while, but, regionalization, I'd love to see it. The old days of, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Colorado, because I'm an Oklahoma person,
Right.
even though I live in Colorado now. Those were the heady days of football. The fact is that, the regionalization, the rivalry, the hatred almost to a point, it just drove the sport to where people enjoyed it and became lifelong. Right now, I think you're losing the fan base because it's so diluted down and there's nothing really important as far as, there's no rivalry, and that's the thing, like, said earlier, the SEC still got it right. They're still in a geographic, the south, they're across that southern
Right.
tier. And they haven't gone totally crazy going coast to coast like some of the other conferences have. I, I, I would love to see him put it into a regionalized conferences, 8 to 10 teams in this region, where you cut down on travel and you go back to the good old days where you could drive and go see your team play. I can remember sitting with you at OU, and we're down in the Tech little section of the end zone set aside for Tech fans because you had the tickets and but there were still quite a few Tech fans all across the stadium who had bought OU, people's tickets. So I don't know. I'm more for the regionalization. I think we need to get back to the way it's intended to be.
Well, to that point, I think that if they do set up this super conference where, let's say there's the top 64 teams and they have their playoffs, I've got a saying that it's always room for another Southwest Airlines. Someone will come up with a clever way to compete against this super conference. And maybe the rest of the schools go back to that idea, John. Maybe the schools that are left out of the super conference, they band together in regional models, and maybe that's how they compete against the bigger group. Because I got to tell you, I can only stand so many Mississippi State, South Carolina games. I mean, I think that there are teams that carry each league, and when you take those teams out, look at Indiana, what they did this year, but before that, they were the losingest team in college football history.
They still probably are, even with the 2 successful seasons.
Oh, yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, Kevin, on any given Saturday, what's your viewing habits for college football? What do you like to watch?
Well, of pretty much anything that's on TV now. Obviously, if South Carolina is playing Mississippi State, that's not anything that's going to draw my attention. But
Right.
probably, being that I was in the SEC for 7 years, generally speaking, the top SEC game. Now, I got to the point, too, where I'd watch, Channel Surf and watch Notre Dame on NBC, that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, it's not too tough to find a good game on between 5, 6 different stations you got out there.
Let me ask you guys, what service do you use? Like here, I use Fubo, and with that, it gives you the capability to record the games too. So usually, early in the week, I'll go through the whole Saturday schedule and I'll basically record every game on the air. And that way, if there's some exciting game, between South Dakota State and North Dakota or whatever, it's got a fantastic finish. I can go back and watch that. But what service do you have, Kevin?
I couldn't even begin to tell you.
You have cable, or do you
I've got
have you cut the cord?
I've got
Okay,
cable.
Tom, how about
We
you,
use
Tom?
Sling, and very
Sling?
similar to Fubo. We can watch everything, and I also have the ESPN package, so I get all the way through ESPN Ocho, and I'm able to watch any game on any of the networks from the SEC and all that. It's also got all the Fox networks, so it's pretty impressive from the ability to be able to watch all the games. Just about every game of any import is on
Right.
TV somewhere.
Well, what about you, Coach K?
Yeah, we got Dish, and with that we have ESPN and a lot of. I can pretty much get any game I want, that I'm really interested in. I go out a week ahead of time, look at the schedule, and just like you, I push the record button, and I may record 6 or 8 games, and then whichever one turns out to be the best, I'll watch it at a later time when on the Monday or Tuesday when I'm not really interested in watching one of the lesser schools, I guess.
Right.
But it's there. It's the way that it's being done. The thing is, I keep going back to it in my mind, though, and I look at it, I keep seeing with all these things and all these proposals, the fly in the ointment is going to end up being, what's Notre Dame going to do? They've got their own $50 million TV package.
Right.
Now,
They're
in
not going
football
to give that
alone,
up easily.
and they're not. Look at it right now. They will not share anything with anybody. And the fact is, are they willing to go into a group and throw their 50 million into the
Hey,
pot?
Coach, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is a viable point.
No.
Viable point. I grew up a good Catholic boy in New York City, rooting for Notre Dame. I wasn't a diehard fan, but I was a Notre Dame fan. I can remember when Terry Hanratty and Jim Seymour played and that kind of stuff.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I was a Notre Dame fan. Where I quit being a Notre Dame fan was when they signed on with NBC, because it was and this would have been about in the mid to late 80s. It was the most hypocritical thing I ever saw, because what you're talking about going in as a group, they had a group of about 60 teams that were in there negotiating with each other, and they were negotiating with CBS. Well, the SEC wanted to break off, and Notre Dame convinced them, no, you don't need to break off. We need to be all in this together.
That's right. I remember that.
Okay, we
yes.
need to be in this together. Well, as Notre Dame was saying this, they were across the street with NBC negotiating with them for their own
Right.
network. And not only that, because they knew what the SEC or what their group was offering CBS, Notre Dame could drive a better deal. And
Right.
they did. And it was one of the most self-serving things I think I ever saw. And afterwards, I came to the conclusion, listen, Notre Dame is a commercial outfit, no different than Walt Disney World or Caesar Palace. The idea is to make money. And, all this other stuff they talk about, their virtues and whatnot. Yeah, they make money. Their whole idea is to make money, and that's what they're going to continue to do.
Well, even when they go to a bowl game, they're not, if Texas, OU, South Carolina, any one of the other schools goes to a bowl game, it's shared throughout the conference. If Notre Dame goes to a bowl game, they get the entire pie.
You bet.
They get everything.
And so I can see them becoming the outlier. The fact is that, again, they've got a seat at the table as the same as the SEC, the ACC, anybody else. They have a much louder voice. And like you just said, they drove a bargain that strictly benefited them.
And for the younger viewers, you go all the way back before 1970, Notre Dame didn't play in bowl games.
Right.
No.
Their first bowl game was the Cotton Bowl against Texas, I believe, for 40 years or something like that. They didn't compete in any bowl games.
Yeah,
well, I mean, they're in the ACC and everything but football because they don't want to share that $50 million NBC contract. And I agree, it's greed. It's hypocrisy to a certain degree.
Do you guys feel that they really hurt themselves this last year when they sort of picked up their ball and took it home when they didn't get in the playoffs? They looked pretty bad.
I agree. I think they looked really, really bad. And to Kevin's point, the greed is off the table now. It's just off the charts. And it makes it almost unenjoyable. Growing up a good Catholic boy as well, and my dad was a huge Notre Dame fan. I can remember one year when the USC game was going to be on, our TV went out, and my dad was going bananas. We had to go rent a little bitty black and white TV so we could watch Anthony Davis run all over Notre Dame that year. And I can remember that like it was yesterday, with my dad screaming at the little black and white TV, and I mean, it was crazy. Looking back on it now, what a bunch of greedy guys.
Well, and that was the day, and again, this is dinosaur days talking. That was the day when you had 3 games. That was it in a day. You had the noon kickoff, the afternoon kickoff, and then on a special occasion, you
got
got
an
the
evening.
USC Notre Dame game, or you got USC UCLA, and that's all there was. I mean, just
Well,
like the NFL, there was only 2 games. There was the kickoff at noon, and then there was the 2:30, 3:30 game, and that was it.
And that's why the bowl game season was so special back then, because you got to see a bunch of football with all of these bowl games, which normally during the season you only had a handful of games to choose from.
That's a subject I think we need to also address. What is going to happen to the bowl games now? I think there's a
If-
proposal. I think what they're looking at now is doing bowl games preseason instead of postseason, because the college football playoff has made them really
irrelevant.
although they still draw for TV purposes. ESPN owns about 10 of these bowl games, and ESPN will play a game in a concrete parking lot just to have programming. That's the key. They want programming all the time. Kevin, we're talking about bowl games. What do you think their place in this whole thing is now?
Well, I'm going to tell you a story about Montgomery, Alabama. But when I was there, they had the blue-gray game there forever. And the blue-gray game finally lost its significance because there was a time when there were 6 or 7 other bowl games, there are plenty of great players available to go to the blue-gray game. Well, all of a sudden, when you've got 30 bowl games out there, they could hardly draw any good players there. It was very rare, and so the thing lost its interest. Well, they started a deal called the Camellia Bowl, and it went over like gangbusters. They'd have a team like, let's say, East Carolina playing Southern Mississippi, and I ought to actually look up and see who the games were, but the stadium seated about 18,000. Those teams would both come from their areas of the world, and they'd fill it. I mean, they'd fill it, and they'd make for a great atmosphere, and that is a good deal. Now, what you don't like to see in a bowl, and you see them all the time on TV, where you realize this is just a TV game. It's not anything but to fill time for ESPN, and there'll hardly be any crowd there. The ones that are there aren't all that enthusiastic. John, we need to go back to the days when we had the Cotton Bowl, the Rose Bowl, the Orange Bowl, and
Sugar Bowl.
Was it?
And those were the major games, and that was it, and I think that possibly maybe moving some of these other smaller bowls to preseason. And, I think that you could say, Indiana and Southern Cal could play in a preseason game, and that would be pretty interesting.
It might have some merit. I sit back and think about another type of bowl game. You were talking about the blue-gray game, Kevin. Do you remember the old college all-star game where the
all-star players against the team that won the NFL championship in Chicago every year, the NFL champion? Because I remember I had a distant cousin play in it, and it was the year the Jets were playing. And I won't mention his name, but I remember he caused quite a scandal by calling them a bunch of drunk old men. And if you remember the Jets, that's probably pretty accurate.
Probably very accurate.
Yeah. But Coach K, that's the first time I met Barry Switzer. He was an assistant coach at the college all-star game in Lubbock, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, and especially for somebody like me, a student, working out at the college all-star game. What was really cool was, the players were paired up with people who were their, escorts, if you will, around town. And it was fun, going around town with all these guys. So anyway, well, I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen, but I think the consensus here is nothing's going to happen as far as this sports commission. I don't know if you saw what President Trump said. What his idea was to go back the way it was before the NIL, before the players are being paid, and find some judge. He would do a signing statement, and he'd find some judge that would ram it through the way it used to be. And I think that's a pretty far out
That's not going to
idea.
happen.
That's not
Yeah.
going to happen.
That,
I don't think there's
that's
any chance of that happening.
putting the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah,
It isn't going to
exactly.
happen. I mean, the fact is, again, you can go back. It's been going on forever. You talked about it. Kevin talked about, when I went to OU in 1965, the parking lot at Washington House dorm, the football dorm, all new cars, GTOs, 442s, you name it, that was there. And, you go across to Jefferson Hall, baseball, basketball, track, we got the clunkers. So it's been going on for a long time. Just like you said, there's been that code of silence. And I can remember we had to fill out a financial statement for the NCAA, like where did you work? How much did you get paid? It's a joke. I mean, the fact is to go back to the way it was, totally unfair to the athletes. I think there has to be some kind of just compensation because they're putting their lives on the line. I mean, they're putting everything out there for a commodity, a product. It's entertainment, and they should be compensated. But it needs to be under some kind of control.
Well, the thing is that I laugh because I see the colleges now are releasing their NIL payments for the year. Come on, we all know that. I don't care what they report. There's probably just as much under the table, just like it has always been.
I don't think it's changed. I think, the fact that it's kind of a smoke screen, look at my hand over here, but don't see this down. Don't see what's going on down here.
Right.
This is on the above, but this is all still.
Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
all right,
one of my favorite movies.
Let's sort of move on to your area, Kevin.
Basketball.
Kevin, that's sort of your area. It's tournament time this week. Do you keep track of the different leagues, or do you just follow your favorite teams?
I kind of keep track of what's going on everywhere to a degree. Now, the main thing, I follow the SEC because there's two things. One, Chris Beard, the coach of Ole Miss, and his assistant, Mark Adams, are time friends of mine. So I keep and, see what they're doing. And then, I'll follow the Big 12 because that's where Texas Tech is and whatnot. And, I did their coaches show for a year and whatnot and actually covered them for a year. But, I'm almost convinced about anything could happen.
As we talked about last week, there's probably about 20 schools that if they got hot, they could go to the Final Four or they could lose in the first round. And boy, we had another yo-yo for the Red Raiders this week, didn't we?
Talking about the game at BYU.
Yeah, incredible.
Be disappointed in that game. I mean, they led for 3 quarters and some of the fourth, or not quarters. They led for most of the game and then just fell apart in the last half of the second half.
Well, that means they'll probably go to the Final Four.
Well, they've got the talent to do it even without Toppin. But then again, they could lose in the first round. I don't even know what to expect in the Big 12 tournament.
Well, I saw that Arizona's star was the player of the year. I thought it was pretty classy. Toppin was named first team all conference, even though I
think he was well deserved. I think he played well, but it's unfortunate what happened to him. I'll tell you, a team that's really hot right now is the team where I live. Texas A&M Aggies are playing pretty good in the Southeastern Conference right now. They're putting together a good little run, and I think other teams need to take notice of them. I'm not saying they're going to go deep into the tournament, but they're going to hurt somebody. I think they're going to.
I think their coach Billy McMillan. I think what I saw was he had the most wins in a first-year coach at A&M for the last 30 years.
His track record is phenomenal, though. I mean, he was at Mountain Brook High School in the Birmingham area, and he just flat out cleaned and fried them. He had a phenomenal record. Then he goes to Samford, and the time he was there, the 5 years he was there, they just did incredible. So apparently he knows a little bit about what he's doing.
I think he plays he has the boys play a very up-tempo, fast-paced game, and they shoot lots and lots of threes. I was listening to an interview this morning with Pop Isaacs, who's one of their star players who used to play for Tech.
Right.
He's playing for A&M now, and he said, Coach gets after them if they don't shoot more than 40 three-pointers in a game.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Kevin, you remember when we were out in West Texas? Remember Ken Edwards? That's all he cared about is how many shots per game that they took. It didn't matter how many rebounds they got or anything. He insisted that they shoot all the time. Let's move on and talk a little bit about baseball. You know, Coach K, I really wasn't interested in the World Baseball Classic, but boy, what I saw this week was pretty amazing. When Team USA hosted Mexico at Daikin Park here in Houston, it was like a playoff game. It was completely a sellout. A raucous fan base from Mexico was there. And you could tell that the players really got into it because it was like October baseball here in March.
One of my former players was a spectator there. He was a fan. He sent me a video of part of it and just the crowd noise. And he kind of did a pan of what was going on in the stands. And it took on a whole different atmosphere, something, you don't see except in usually postseason baseball where there's so much on the line. And I think you saw a lot of, both teams demonstrating that, they're playing for their country. It totally,
Right.
it was heartwarming. I
Well,
guess would be a way to see that
Yeah,
they
Paul
were putting
Skeens,
themselves.
really got into it. He even brought the Air Force baseball team down to be in
I
the
saw
cheering
that.
section.
Yeah, he started his career out at Air Force,
Mhm.
And I think
As
he
a
played 1 or
catcher.
2 years.
As
He
a
was a
catcher.
catcher.
Yeah.
And played there a couple of years, I think. And another young man, Griffin Jacks or something like that,
Yes.
also helped pay for all of
He
them.
actually was the first ever Air Force graduate to play Major League Baseball. He's like a lieutenant. I mean, he's a functioning Air Force officer.
I thought that was a very, very cool thing that they did. But to your point, John, that crowd was amazing, and it was almost like a Mexico home game. I mean, being down here close to Mexico, it was a great crowd.
Well, I don't know that the USA is going to go all the way through because that game did sort of reveal that if they don't have Paul Skeens or if they don't have the Detroit pitcher who looks like he's not coming back, Skubal, then they get pretty thin after their starters. So I'll look for Mexico to make I think they're going to qualify, and to move on to the next round. The top two in each of the pools move on. But Team USA has, I think, an advantage because in the next round, they'll still be playing here in Houston before they go to Miami. Man, the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico and those Caribbean teams really had a crowd advantage down there.
John and I were talking a little bit about college baseball, getting ready to kick up into conference play. That's about to start, I think, this weekend. We also had the women's conference basketball tournaments that have already finished, most of them in basketball. I think Texas won the SEC. They knocked off South Carolina, which was a big shock, as South Carolina's been number one for a long time. Coach Staley's done a remarkable job, but I think UT kind of shocked them there. So there's a lot of things going on in the world of sports right now.
TCU was ranked number one in the Big 12 women's ranks. They got knocked off by West Virginia. I don't know much about West Virginia women's basketball,
Other
so
than
we're out of our depth.
They're coached by a former West Texas A&M coach.
Oh, yeah, who?
I don't even remember the guy's name, but Rick Cooper is the head coach at West Texas A&M. He was there for about 20 years, and I happened to be talking to Rick last night. He mentioned the coach from West Virginia, the West Virginia women, is one of his former assistants.
Wow.
Interesting.
That was a interesting tidbit you had about Eastern New Mexico in the Super Bowl. It's amazing. That brings me, talking about small college coaches, let me add a personal note here. Last month, a very good friend of mine passed away. His name was John Levra. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of John Levra. He became a legend coaching at Pittsburgh State, and then he moved out to New Mexico Highlands, where I had spent some time. He actually moved into the NFL and coached the Bears with Mike Ditka. And here's a story how that sort of all ties in. Back in the 90s, I was working for the Greater Houston Sports Association, and we did the College Baseball Player of the Year. And we got pretty good buddies with the Rotary Club in downtown Houston, who did the Lombardi Award. Well, it got to where they were looking for help, in their award. And so I became someone who moved over and took over as executive director at the Lombardi Award. Well, you know how those volunteer organizations go. There was one volunteer, the award is in December. And after about a month after that, then we start planning for the next year. And we had a volunteer that was adamant. Well, I have a friend of mine who says that he's going to be able to get Roger Staubach next year as our keynote speaker. So we go along all year. How's that coming? Oh, yeah, Roger Staubach is going to be our keynote speaker. So we get to November, a month before early December event, and he goes, Roger Staubach's not going to be able to come in. So I said, well, let me take a chance here. So I called Coach Levra and I said, Coach, do you think Coach Ditka would be interested in coming down here? I know that he's a big fan of Vince Lombardi. And so Coach Levra gave me his phone number. And I called him and I just said, Coach Ditka, you have no idea who I am. I know this is completely out of the blue, and I explained what we were doing, and it was, for cancer research, the proceeds, and it was in honor of Vince Lombardi. Well, he immediately said yes. So I got a call a week later from Coach Ditka saying, John, I know I told you I was going to come down, but I didn't look on my calendar, and he had a boys' home that he always went to their Christmas party. And I said, well, I understand, Coach, if you need to do that, that's something, that you need to do. I totally understand, and we'll see what we can do. And he just stopped me in mid-sentence, and he said, look, I told you I'm coming. I'll be there. So Mike Ditka came. And that year, we raised more money than any year previously, and he was such a big hit. And I have a great memory of after the award dinner, sitting down in the lobby of the Hyatt Hotel with Mike Ditka, Chris Myers, and a couple of the SIDs from the schools, and Kellen Winslow. And that is just a vivid memory that I have. And it just goes to show you that Coach Lever had such a big heart, and he is one of those guys. He's also a coach at Stephen F. Austin, turned their program around, got him a new stadium built. There's so many guys, Coach K, that you really nationally don't hear of, but are the bedrock of that sport. I know you know some guys like that, don't you, Coach K?
There's a lot of guys out there that they do so much behind the scenes, and then there are those that are in the forefront, get the spotlight, but that's true almost all of our life. We've got those unsung heroes. It's not just in athletics. Every day, I mean, I've been an educator my entire life, and you look at the impact that teachers have and coaches have, it's immeasurable over time. I love it. I mean, one of my great joys is to get an email or a letter from a former student, that I taught 20, 30, 40 years ago. Like, you made a difference, you did this, you did that, you showed, So it's just not me. I think that's across the board. You got people in all walks of life that are just doing things for the betterment of mankind. It just, it's kind of moving. And like you say, somebody like that who goes out of his way, and then what Ditka did, I told you I was coming, I'm coming. That sounds like something Iron Mike would say.
Yeah.
The fact that just personifies his personality. I made a commitment, and by golly, probably in a little more colorful words.
Yes.
I say I'm going to be there. So yeah,
and you can imagine a guy like me calling Mike Ditka out of the blue, and
you got bigger ones than I do.
I mean, and he was such a nice guy. He was not like what his persona is at all. Just a sweet man. Then I got reunited with him when he got the NFL job over in New Orleans. And as a matter of fact, he sort of felt that coming down to Houston and, making that appearance put his name back in the public eye because he had retired from the Bears, and then it just sort of gone quiet. And so that got his name back out there in the public, eye. So guys, let's go. Let's wrap this up and go to scatter shooting. Kevin, what's on your mind this week?
Let me think what's in my mind. I'll tell you what, probably the passing of Lou Holtz is one thing that was on my mind, because he has had an incredible career, but he's let's just say he was a different kind of cat.
Tom, what's your scatter shooting this week?
Well, Kevin stole mine there. I was going to talk about Lou Holtz as well. I think his impact on college football was almost second to none in his time frame, especially, from Arkansas, even from Little William and Mary, all the way through to Notre Dame, to South Carolina. He made such an impact everywhere he went. So I'll steal some of Kevin's thunder from that.
You know what Coach Bowden told Coach Holtz when they played and he was at William and Mary? He accused Coach Bowden of running up the score. Coach Bowden said, well, what you need to do is you need to go out and recruit more Williams and less Marys, and you'll do a little bit better.
Well, if memory serves me correctly, that's the only time William and Mary ever made an appearance in a bowl game, I think.
I haven't really watched the ESPN scoreboard show, after the ball games, since he was on it with Mark May. I thought that group was really fun to watch.
Incredible group. Yes.
And now, not so much. Just a bunch of know-it-alls now. So
yeah, it's a different dynamic. I think even the early morning show, the kickoff show is not the same without Corso this year. It's just the chemistry's a little off. But anyway, that was kind of where I was going to go. Kevin went there. But I think also we talked about the surprise with the UT team beating South Carolina in college basketball and women's college basketball. I've got to tell you, that was pretty impressive. That was a big, big win. And the University of Texas has always had a strong women's basketball team, but that powerhouse in South Carolina, that was a tough one. That's a big tree to fall.
Don Staley's
they won,
done a
and
great
they won
job.
handily.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, they did. They blew him off the court.
I mean, it wasn't just a squeaker. It was definite domination. So, totally different thing there. So I agree.
John, what's your scatter shooting this week?
The World Baseball Classic. I mean, the fact it's so exciting to see players play with the emotion and the desire, especially, at this time of year, because we think of spring training, it's just kind of show up, go through the motions, get in shape, and get ready for the season. This is the full season. This is, like we said earlier, it's kind of playoff baseball. And, the spirit of the different countries, I really get into that. I mean, I really enjoy watching players play for the joy and fun of it. So my hats are off to them. I'm glad they're doing it.
Well, I'm going to go back a couple of weeks. I saw this and forgot to bring it up before now, but I'm going to throw out Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game. That happened on February 28th, the anniversary, and it's when he scored 100 points against the New York Knicks in 1962. And to me, when you look at the write-up on that ball game, it was pretty incredible because it didn't even happen in Philadelphia where he was playing. It happened in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And not only that, there was no telecast of the ball game. There's only some recordings, audio only, of the fourth quarter, which they've now preserved in the recording registry in the Library of Congress. But the incredible thing about that was he not only scored 100 points, but in that season, 1962, he averaged 50 points a game. Can you imagine that?
Well, John, I'll tell you what, I saw something this week, and it was on actually ESPN's Game Day show, where Pete Maravich averaged 44 points a game for LSU. Somebody went back and got all his old tapes when he played at LSU, and they determined if the three-point rule had been in effect when Maravich played, he would have averaged 57 a game.
Really? Wow. Go
I
ahead.
got a chance to see him play live, and he was 50 years. I don't know that there's a player today that was as entertaining as he was to watch in college. I was privileged. I mean, I got to see him in the Classic in Oklahoma City play OCU, and he just made them look silly. I mean, passing, dribbling, shooting. And I agree, Kevin. If they'd have had the 3-point line, he would have lit it up.
And I only saw him play, as a pro when he came through against the Rockets. And that's the amazing thing with the amount of money that the players are being paid today. If you can imagine this, back then, the NBA was struggling against college basketball to get games on the air. And now it's just amazing, the transformation. Kevin, what do you think about the salaries in the NBA now?
Pure capitalism. You go with what you can get. But yeah, they're, how about this? One of my former students at South Garland High signed the contract for $208 million, Tyrese Maxey. So, I guess it's pure capitalism. Whatever the market dictates you can get, so be it. But yeah, it's a little ridiculous how high they are.
Guys, that'll do it for this week's edition of Sportz-USA.com. We'll be back. You're coming your way a week from today, and we'll be back with a full crew next week. Bo Carter will be back with us, as well as a new addition, Lee Baker. Thanks for joining us, everybody. See you then.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Sports USA, available at our website at sportswithaz-usa.com. And remember to click and favorite so you can join us next time on sportsusa.com.